On this episode of This Week in Space, we're talking to Scott Tibbitts, an entrepreneur who made $7 worth of spare parts into a vital piece of Mars probe tech. Join us.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
This is This Week in Space, episode number 138, recorded on November 22nd, 2024, from the garage to Mars. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the very special This Week in Space, the From the Garage to Mars edition. I'm Rod Pyle, editor-in-chief of Badass Magazine, and I'm joined, as always, by the inexpressible Tariq Malik, editor-in-chief at space.com with a monogram sweater. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing well, Rod. I'm doing well. Happy Thanksgiving early, by the way. We're like T-minus 7 days away as we're recording this.
And let's give a nod to your brilliant wife for knitting you that extraordinary sweater. For those of you watching on video, he's got a T for Tariq. She actually did it, I happen to know, so that when he got lost, somebody would be able to tell who he was and call her and say, "Hey, your husband's over here. Come and get him."
I think she was like, "Yeah, go ahead and keep him," right?
Ooh, okay. Today we'll be speaking in a few moments with Scott Tibbitts, who is the author of a new book called From the Garage to Mars, and a polymath engineer who, origin stories don't get much better than this, took $7 worth of parts from the hardware store, basically a copper tube and some wax, and created from that a company that worked in the space sector with NASA JPL and other places to make millions, and an incredible company with over, what did he say? How many employees?
150 at the, I think at least. And they went to Saturn on Cassini.
Yeah,
man. Worked on Chandra, lots of fun stuff.
Okay, but we don't want to phone in the third act. So before we start,
yes,
please remember, do us a solid and be sure to like, subscribe, and all the other good podcast things on the podcatcher service of your choice, because we're counting on you. And now, speaking of space detritus, our weekly space joke, this one from David Robeson.
Dave.
Hey, Tariq.
Yes, Rod.
Why don't scientists trust atoms?
Why don't scientists trust atoms?
Because they make up everything, including our space jokes.
I
like this one.
That's a good one, Dave. That's a good one. I think I've seen that on a shirt before, but I like it. It's still good. So.
Don't say that.
No, I think it's good. It's a good one. It's a good one.
And whatever you saw on the shirt probably wasn't impugning our space jokes. Now, speaking of which, I've heard that some folks want to turn us into spare parts when it's time for a space joke on this show. But you can help, as David did. Send us your best, worst, or most different space joke at twit@twit.tv. And now it's time for headlines.
Headline news.
I love it.
Anthony was on the switch for that. So it's hard not to start with anything but Starship test flight number 6, which was not a catch this time, but they did hit some other milestones.
Yeah, so it's in the can. SpaceX has launched their 6th test flight for Starship. It was a pretty good success. Now, as you mentioned, they did not actually land or catch the rocket, the super heavy booster. They actually said they were go for it, and then I guess at the last second there was some commit criteria that went red, and so they just.
I read about that. It was that or Elon made a statement about that later. It was that the rocket apparently lost telemetry with the Mechazilla.
Yeah.
So basically, it couldn't talk to the landing pad anymore, right?
Yeah, and so they decided just to go ahead and divert, and it went out, did a pretty smooth soft landing. We got video of it here. If you're watching the stream later of it, like launching into space, gorgeous day. They launched at 5 p.m. at night Eastern time, which was the first time they've done like an evening launch, which was great because for the first time we saw the Starship land in daylight in the Indian Ocean, which was absolutely spectacular. It took about an hour as the light. It was the very same profile as Flight 5. So everything else seemed to go well. They tested new bits of heat shielding in different places to record the heat there. They did use an older type of heat shield. They said that the new one, Flight 7, will have a new different design of flaps that are going to be a little bit better on the heat resistant on the way down. But it was interesting to me that they didn't have any burn through that I could see that we've seen on the last couple flights, and they put heat shielding in what looked like where you would expect windows to be, which I thought was pretty interesting. Like, are they testing for like what the windows are going to have to?
You're talking about up
stand?
in the
Up
nose,
on the nose.
Starship. Yeah.
And ask me about bananas, Rod.
Do you have any bananas today?
Yeah, well, SpaceX sure does, because for the first time they launched a payload on Starship. And again, Starship is like the world's biggest rocket. It's 400 feet tall. It's like bigger than it's more powerful. I
tell you, man, seeing that shot. So I don't remember seeing a shot of the interior of ship, the upper stage before. But the banana was the only thing that gave it any perspective. It's really large.
It's their first payload, and they sent up a stuffed banana for scale. And you have to imagine this massive cavernous space with a single banana suspended by 4 different cables inside. That's what they did. That was their first payload. And they said it was good practice to going through the FAA about how to go approve payloads. And they also had the little Pez dispenser spit out structure that they're going to use to stack all the Starships or Starlinks on in the future. And then the Starship is going to just spit them out like a Pez dispenser instead of releasing them all in a big stack. So they did a lot of that. They also relit the Raptor engine for the first time in like near orbital speeds. Yeah. In a vacuum. And they had a very smooth like landing. Like they were able to touch down in the Indian Ocean as planned. So very smooth flight. I think it would have been nice to see the Super Heavy booster like get caught. We're seeing video of it here now of its soft landing in the ocean. And the sad part is that right after SpaceX cut away from the Super Heavy booster splashing down, it exploded like in a wonderful fireball, and they cut away before we could watch it happen. So, but there are photos of it that Getty and other folks took. So it's pretty good. It's pretty good to see. So I think it's a big notch. They got FAA approval for 25 flights at least next year. So, all right.
And just to put a point on that, there have been other rocket engines that reignited in a vacuum before. I mean, as early as certainly Apollo, when the upper stage and the S4B had to reignite.
Yeah.
But they had not done it with this engine.
Exactly.
So that's something that has to be proved before you can move forward with most of the intended missions for Starship.
And it would not surprise me if we see an orbital flight before this year is out, or at least an attempt, where they actually circle the planet. Yeah. Yeah, there's the year is still young. They got a month left. They got a bajillion of those Starships and Super Heavies at Starbase right now. So we'll have to see how it all shakes out. Yeah,
that's true. It looks like an old a Ford lot.
And I will say one last thing. They said during the broadcast they are looking at being able to pump out a ship every 8 hours eventually at Starbase. Can you imagine that? Every 8 hours.
Frankly, I can't.
20 ships a month.
Recently said they wanted to do 400 launches in 3 years, I think it was.
Yeah, it is insane.
I mean,
if they're able to hit that rate. So,
bully to them, but let's ask the people down at Boca Chica how they feel about that. Speaking of which, the FAA, which has been, I wouldn't say glacial, but kind of molasses-like in terms of granting these flight licenses, which are kind of important. And they're not the only agency they have to deal with down at Starbase. They have to deal with Fish and Game, and FCC and others, but FAA has kind of been the big one. Appears to have changed their tune, maybe because they see an incoming administration that could say, hey, step it up. What do you think?
Well, an incoming administration that's going to say, hey, step it up, and also a dire need by NASA to have these test flights complete so they can launch these flights over time. So by the way, both of these stories are all from space.com, but I mean, you can find them from your preferred space news, hopefully space.com, but but yeah, on Wednesday, so one day after SpaceX's successful Flight 6 launch, the FAA put out a new draft environmental assessment. It's 160 pages that says that instead of SpaceX's kind of current license, where it says that they can launch 5 Starships a year, now they're going to increase that up to 25 at least, and so that kind of gives them like that's easily 2 flights a month, right? Mm-hmm. To be able to ramp up their testing, and they might have gotten a bit of a nod from their most recent Flight 5, Flight 6, where they had a license for multiple launches as long as the profile wasn't too different and there weren't any strange anomalies. So it does seem like there's a bit more relaxing of the rules now that they've got 6 of these under their belts to say, okay, we understand what you're doing now. You can go ahead with your testing campaign, etc. And because NASA really wants to land astronauts on the moon by by 2026 if they can, and they need, how many did we say? 15, 12, like a bajillion, like a dozens
of the tanker flights.
Of these tanker flights at least, and of course you're going to need another order of magnitude of testing.
The smallest
flights.
number I've seen is 15. The highest number I've seen in print was 24.
Yeah, that's a lot of
orchestrating. Yeah,
that's a lot. Yeah, and it's not just Boca Chica alone. These are from South Texas. This FAA document is about launching from Starbase. SpaceX has already built a tower, or they're finishing the tower at the Kennedy Space Center, where they have a lot more flexibility about when and how often they're going to be able to launch. As long as they have the range, there's more complexity there because they're not the only game in town. You've got your ULAs, you've got your space forces there that they're going to have to deal with.
Okay, but let's be honest for a second. How often are they going to have to stop for ULA launch? I'm not besmirching ULA, but at this point, it's like, oh, it's the 42nd of November. I guess we have to stand down for a ULA launch.
Well. I mean, also you got New Blue Origin coming in with New Glenn right out of there. So, so there is that too. So
yeah,
that'll be exciting to see.
They might have to wait once a year. Okay, so we got 2 more stories here. Pick your favorite, and let's jam.
Real quickly, just a quick note that speaking of all sorts of private spaceflight, the day of this recording is Blue Origin's NS-28 launch. They launched it earlier this morning, and it was their 9th crewed spaceflight. This actually came from Robert Perlman over at Collect Space, by the way, because it has a little bit of space history in it. They launched Emily Calandrelli, the quote-unquote space gal, Emmy Award winner, and a big STEM advocate, and you might have seen her on Exploration Space on TV, etc. She became the official 100th woman to fly in space with this NS-28 New Shepard launch on Blue Origin, including they had a few other people, Mark and Sharon Hagel, former passengers as well, and a couple of other folks, J.D. Russell, an entrepreneur, and Hank Walfund, the CEO of a Canadian investment firm. So, a big successful flight for them, and congratulations to Emily Calandrelli, a space media person getting to space. Rod, so that means that there's hope. There's hope for you and I. We'll get there. Maybe we can get on one of these flights together and do a podcast in space.
Look at that picture and tell me there are about 10,000 reasons that other people like Emily are going to fly long before you and I do. For one thing, you could fly 4 of her for the mass of me. Surely other reasons. Let's
hit the gym. You and I, Rod. We'll get there. We'll get there one day.
I keep hitting the gym, and the problem is it hits back. All right. So everybody will be back in just a few moments with Scott Tibbitts, inventor extraordinaire. So go nowhere. This episode of This Week in Space is brought to you by Veeam. Without your data, your customers' trust turns into digital dust. That's why Veeam's data protection and ransomware recovery ensures that you can secure and restore your enterprise data wherever and whenever you need it, no matter what happens. As the #1 global market leader in data resilience, Veeam is trusted by over 77% of the Fortune 500 to keep their businesses running with digital disruptions like ransomware strike. And strike they will. You can't be too prepared. That's because Veeam lets you back up and recover your data instantly across your entire cloud ecosystem, proactively detect malicious activity, remove the guesswork by automating your recovery plans and policies, and you can get real-time support from ransomware recovery experts. Listen, data is the lifeblood of your business, so get resilient with Veeam. Go to veeam.com to learn more. That's VEEAM.com to learn more. And we thank Veeam for supporting This Week in Space. And we're back with Scott Tibbitts. Thank you for joining us today, Scott. How was your morning?
It's been good. It's been, we've gotten a lot done. So it's been a good morning.
Okay, that's good. A morning buffered by apple pie, as you told us before we came on, is always a good morning. And if I could get away with doing that at night without weighing 300 pounds, I'd do it every night.
Well, Yeah. I mean, getting up at 2 a.m, eating half an apple pie. Yeah, I can't be doing that on a regular basis, but yeah, it was.
Sure you can't.
It's early Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving's almost
Yeah,
here.
exactly.
So
Oh, it's
Time to go to-
Thanksgiving week, isn't it? We are officially in that week before Thanksgiving period. You're right.
that's
We are.
right. It's taste testing, so that now when push comes to shove, you know which apple pie to get. I mean, that's valid. That's valid.
I like
Actually,
you guys.
I
Yeah.
think that it's the time of year that you go to Costco and buy those pumpkin pies the size of a manhole cover for $6.
Yeah.
What I don't understand is why there's oil pooled on the top of them. But anyway, let's move on to more important things. So, Scott, you have a kind of an amazing story to tell, which you've been telling for a while, and now you've written a book called From the Garage to Mars, which is a fun read. But I can't figure out how to encapsulate you. So can you describe yourself?
That wasn't on the list of questions you're going to ask me.
Well, that's the joy of it. Yeah.
He always has two lists, Scott. He has two lists.
I know.
So.
The secret, the surprise list.
It's the same way I do accounting for my company. You know, I get different columns.
I understand. Yeah.
How do you, I mean, surely when you go on stage, you have that moment where you say, you know, here's who I am.
Yeah. It's actually a really good question. And it's taken me later in life to figure that out. But definitely was an inventor and entrepreneur when I was in 6th grade, making up stuff and selling to my classmates, getting in trouble for that kind of thing. So I've got that piece of it. And, the entrepreneur side, love space. But the thing that I've started to realize that's kind of in my DNA is I have a tremendous sense of fun, to the embarrassment of my kids, where my inner child is like right there on the surface. They're always rolling their eyes and saying, "Dad, for God's sake, no, just don't do that." But then the other thing I found is the other piece is human connection. I just love connecting with people quickly at a deep level. And I did not realize that those things would come together to kind of be the foundation of why the company took off. And it's taken me a while to look back and realize, yeah, those were the things, all those things coming together. So that's how I'd answer that one.
So would you say primarily inventor, primarily engineer, primarily entrepreneur?
Good
primarily
question.
Not of this world? You can pick your...
These are actually really good questions. It makes you think.
It happens sometimes.
What I think of is the way we can answer that is, what do we lead with when we meet people in our lives? If you said, how would you describe Scott? Probably the top of the list would be, he really loves people. He's a great friend. Great, it does that. And, have you guys seen this one?
Oh, I love it.
Whoa.
Yeah.
I didn't know there was
I found
disco
that by
there.
accident. Yeah.
For people listening, Scott is walking us through the hand gestures for Zoom.
I turned mine off.
That are special because you're on a Mac then, right? Because
Well, I was going to say, that's not even
Rose's
Zoom.
there.
That's just part of the operating system.
Part of the operating
turn
system.
off if you want to. Well, cool. Okay.
But finishing up that question, people would say that I connect with people. I'm a very caring, loving person, and I'm the party bus. So the fun and the loving is how people would characterize me, and the rest is sort of the details.
So that sort of reminds me of the fun bus I took up to Las Vegas once as part of a timeshare offer. And I'm pretty sure you're more fun than that was. Tariq has a question that he's burning to ask.
Yeah.
As always here.
Well, I should ask because I don't think we touched on it before, but Scott, obviously entrepreneur. Your company, Starsis Research, grew to 150 people, and launching little model rockets, which I'm going to ask about in a bit. But all the way up to I think by reading through your description, something like 3,500 devices in space with zero failures, which is crazy, right?
Which is extraordinary. And
so
we'll want to make a point of talking about how that came to be. But
exactly. Yeah. I just wanted to give people like a preamble that, you've done all this work in space, but sometime in the past, space got its hooks like into you, right, Scott? So was it like little Scotty out there with their own Estes rockets or whatnot, or was it something that you fell into later on, either like in college or later on in life, where you really got bit by the space bug to start building like hardware for actual space type of things?
It came from a really interesting direction. My dad was a professor of horticulture at the University of Wisconsin, where I'm from. And he loved space and managed to pivot his career. And in 1967, started working with NASA to fly the first plants in space, where it was his experiment. And so that's when I got hooked on space. That tracked, and then he kept working with NASA on shuttle, and was the first person to grow crops in space. He grew potatoes, which was the basis for the early scene in The Martian.
I was going to say, like Mark Watney.
Like Mark Watney, that's my dad's research. And I didn't know it was coming. And I saw the movie, and imagine what that's like, going, that's my dad. Pride. Just out of the blue. And I actually got a hold of, Andy Weir, the author, and told him about that. And so we went back and forth a little bit. But that's where that came. So I had the space thing, had the entrepreneurship coming from selling cinnamon toothpicks to my classmates. And then those intersected in about 1988.
Well, I hope when you talked to Andy, you told him that it would be a very bad idea to have a bunch of Mars dirt inside your compound, whether or not you're growing potatoes and whether or not you're addressing the question of how you fertilize them, but the perchlorate's in there anyway.
There's a couple of technical
poison dirt. Yeah.
Yeah. A little bit of a stretch, but it wasn't bad. I was impressed.
We had an interview, may have been on the podcast for this one, with Jim Green years ago, who was the NASA chief scientist when that movie came out. And he was an advisor on the film.
Yeah.
And so I sort of had to, stick him a little bit with, okay, the inciting incident, the windstorm of the non-existent atmosphere on Mars. He goes, I know.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's not part of the story. So track for us, if you will. You came from background of nuclear engineering, but moved aggressively into entrepreneurship after having this sort of, I don't know, the challenging entrepreneurship experience a lot of us had when we were younger. Yeah. The difference is you pressed through it and made it work instead of saying, this is too much trouble. So kind of walk us through that path.
Yeah. Well, a little bit of the front end, graduated in chemical engineering. I was on probation. It was kind of a challenge to get through. And then went to Jackson Hole and was a ski bum for a year and a half, and lived with 6 women in this house at the base of...
Well, okay, wait a minute. Sound of screeching brakes.
Oh, no. So hard.
A little more detail here.
I was going to stop there. I'm not going any further. I'm just telling you my backstory, guys.
I know. I'm loving it. Okay.
And then
we'll do that for Tariq After Dark. But
okay, yeah. That's a nicely alliterative title.
You like that? Yeah,
I do like that. Yeah. But then I got hired here in Colorado at what was called the Rocky Flats plant, doing nuclear weapons engineering, which was fascinating technically, but I was not destined for corporate America. Had authority issues, as a lot of us entrepreneurs do. Don't do well with people that you don't think should be in that position. And had a friend that had just started a company making inventing new water heaters for homes. And I joined him as his chief and only engineer, just the two of us in a place with a garage. And this invention came out of it for a water heater that, and I've actually got the original one here. It's this guy. And this is what started the company. And this was used in a water heater by having wax inside here, and the wax melts, and when it melts, it pressurizes to about 3,000 psi. And then Daryl came up with a really special seal arrangement that then translated that into mechanical work. So this extended 2 inches with 40 pounds of force. And it was this amazing magic trick. You could put this in a cup of hot water, and you looked at it and said, there's got to be another use for this. So very different. Most entrepreneurial companies start from solving a big problem. You see a big problem, like I got to get packages overnight somewhere. And you go, well, FedEx. Every once in a while, they start from a technology that you find a place to apply it. And interestingly, things like sticky notes were that, Teflon was that. But this was that. It was too cool not to do something else. And so I went off to find another use for it. and just randomly started cold calling companies, medical. Maybe you could use it for injecting insulin with the heat of your body.
Right.
Or maybe you could use it to passively point solar panels. They could just track the sun like a sunflower. And then somebody mentioned spacecraft. And I had this idea, like, I know what it is. We're going to have this when the spacecraft gets hot, it will open up the windows and cool it off, so to speak.
Right.
And I was certain that's what I'd found. And I cold called NASA
stop right there.
Yes.
Because that's where it gets really good, but we have to go to break, and I don't want to interrupt.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So hang tight, everybody. We'll be right back after this short break. Go nowhere. This episode of This Week in Space is brought to you by US Cloud, the #1 Microsoft Unified Support Replacement. US Cloud is the global leader in third-party Microsoft enterprise support, supporting 50 of the Fortune 500. Switching to US Cloud can save your business 30 to 50% on a true comparable replacement for Microsoft Unified Support. US Cloud supports the entire Microsoft stack 24/7, 365, responds faster, and resolves tickets quicker for clients all around the world. And you always talk to real human beings. Check out their proven track record. They have expert-level engineers with an average of 14.9 years of experience, and that's for break-fix or DSE. They have 100% domestic teams. Your data never leaves the United States. They have financially backed SLAs on response time, and initial ticket response averages under 4 minutes. In 2023, 94% of US Cloud's clients reported saving 1/3 or more when switching from Microsoft Unified Support to US Cloud. From Fortune 500 companies and large health systems to major financial institutions and federal agencies, US Cloud ensures that vital Microsoft systems are working for over 6 million users globally every day. And big brands trust US Cloud, including Caterpillar, HP, Aflac, Dun & Bradstreet, Under Armour, and KeyBank. Even the IT folks at Gartner have chosen US Cloud for their Microsoft support needs. A director of information technology said, and within an hour, US Cloud responded with, 4 engineers. So not only did they bring the right guys to the call, but they brought the cavalry. I just felt like, wow, this was amazing. That was unlike anything I'd experienced with Microsoft in my 8 years of being with Premier. We made the right choice. You know, when it comes to compliance, no one gets it more than US Cloud. ISO, GDPR, and ESG compliance are not just regulatory requirements, but they are strategic imperatives that drive operational efficiency, legal compliance, risk management, and corporate reputation. These standards foster trust and loyalty among customers and stakeholders. They attract investment, and they ensure long-term sustainability and success in a competitive global market. Visit uscloud.com and book a call today to find out how much your team can save. That's uscloud.com to book a call today and get faster Microsoft support for less. Okay, this is the good stuff.
Yeah, he cold calls NASA.
Yeah, I know.
Right?
And I mean, I don't want to say the hubris because, of course, that's what you do. But the challenge of, probably in the day looking through the Rolodex or the online text-only listings of NASA, all 19,000 of them, it's like, who will I call? And you figured it out.
I spend a lot of time mentoring college students that are in entrepreneurship classes. And I'll just go there for a little bit because for anybody who wants to be an entrepreneur, there's 2 things that are often missed. One is customer discovery and the other one's product discovery. And a lot of people start companies just from, hey, I got a cool idea. I'll bet I'll just start marketing it. And that is folly compared to surgically finding the customer and asking him, what is it you really want? And, NASA's filled with ex-AV club and chess club nerds like me. And I just kind of was just gosh golly, saying, golly, guys, I got this cool thing. And they recognized me as one of the nerd tribe. So it really was a matter of just looking through the phone book. And, there's a bunch of your viewers that have no idea what that is, but you just riff on the phone book.
Yeah.
And, here's the guy that's head of space mechanisms. I'll give him a call. And this goofy guy's calling out of the blue. Nobody does that. So he took the call out of curiosity. His name was Carl Marchetto, went on to run Kodak, actually. And he said, come on out. we might be able to use this. We're going to Saturn, and we got some problems. So I put this thing in a box, and fortunately, my partner said, put a heater on one of them. Maybe they'll need that. Mm-hmm. Thank God he did that, because I'd have a different life if he didn't. And, you know, the hubris of an inventor going, I know what this will be used for, almost brought me down. So I fly out there, and I've got this little cardboard box, and I'm walking through JPL, and it smells like eucalyptus. And
so JPL is where you flew out to. Okay, that's good. I was going to ask, like, where did you
JPL.
go?
And for a bunch of reasons, my point of view, JPL was perfect. Love them for a whole bunch of reasons. And I went into this room with a bunch of guys, and I think part of the reason I succeeded is I took a 25-pound weight with me in my luggage so I could demonstrate this. And there was so much pity for me that they gave me the time to demonstrate it. I mean, what kind of idiot carries a 25-pound weight? But it made for a dramatic prototype. It's right in front of them. They said, we couldn't care less about cooling our spacecraft, but we're trying to replace explosives. Mm-hmm. And the reason is twofold. It's a huge problem for us. One is we never test the one we fly.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And so you do it statistically. You blow up 100 of them. And the joke at NASA is, the technicians go, well, that would have been a good one to use. That would have been a good one to use. So it's statistics. And then the other thing is you've got a sensitive instrument having a shotgun shell go off by it. So now you got to make that instrument handle that. And so now you've got $100,000 problem sometimes. So this thing that was made with hardware store parts notionally could solve a $50,000 or $100,000 problem with this piece. And that's why we succeeded, is we had such an effective solution for such a huge problem that created the ability to drive a company from somebody that wasn't a rocket scientist, because I was bringing something that was, world changing for them. And the spacecraft was Cassini. It used to be called Mariner Mark II way back then. And we did fly about 20 mechanisms on it. I managed to sneak my kids into the lab, and don't tell NASA this. This isn't being broadcast.
I'm sure it's between you and us, okay, Scott. Like NASA's not listening right now.
Yeah. All right. Good.
We found out that's not true, but go ahead.
Yeah. Okay.
Raj, he's talking.
I'm telling a story. So I had I remember this vividly, having my hands around my 7-year-old son as he etches his name on one of the covers on Cassini.
Wow.
Now we anodized it properly, and we followed all the rules, but it wasn't something we actually, necessarily told NASA about now.
That is so awesome.
Well, they know now, because we've got
they know
notes
now.
from headquarters before. And I should just mention for people who most of our listeners and watchers know for sure, but NASA has used since the 50s explosive squibs, small devices that have a little explosive compound in them, to either actuate a part, separate a part, blow fairings off the top of the rocket, or sometimes just initiate an instrument, or like in the case of Viking, as I recall, that's what was supposed to release the pins in the seismometer cage, which didn't in one case. And anyway, so these are kind of a one-shot deal.
Yeah.
And if you're out at Saturn in the great big dark cold and your explosive actuator goes and doesn't happen, it's a really bad day.
Yeah. And, there's lots of stories.
And just before I let Tariq loose on you, so because of the nature of paraffin being this incredible pressurizer in effect,
right?
Can you cycle that if it doesn't work the first time? Can you heat it a second time and cycle it?
This is what got really cool, and it was almost an artifact of how this worked out. So this could operate 1,000 times.
1,000.
1,000, and we could test the living daylights out of it. I mean, you want to test 100 times? Go ahead. So now the statistics flip. Instead of I've tested 100 of them. I hope this one works. Now you've taken the one you're going to use and tested it 100 times. The number of 9s you get from that is extraordinary. It just works, and everybody knew it just would work.
Wow.
But the thing, there's a nuance of this that I think you'll appreciate. the way the seal works is it's not an O-ring seal. It's what we call a squeeze boot. And this is what Daryl, my partner, invented. It's a long piece of rubber that's like squeezes and pops this out, just like you'd squeeze a banana and pop a banana out. But we put a very special lube in it so that when it pressurized, it equally distributed and became a pure hydrodynamic lubrication with no friction. So even though you're squeezing it, it was ridiculously efficient. We got 98% of the energy out as mechanical work. And if you didn't have that lubricant, it just would have squeezed and blown up. And so the key to it was that lubricant. Anyways, I digress a little bit, but
I'm still trying to wrap my head around it because I didn't think we were going to actually see it like exactly how it works. And I was reading the book and I got to the like wax in space and I still couldn't picture it like until you showed the little squibby thing there. So it's just insane to me.
And I forget about that, Tariq, that it really, that part of it, everybody wants to know about. They don't want to just go, oh yeah, cool invention, talking about the company. I'm realizing I need to have like an animation and really explain that because people lean in and go, oh, I get it. That's cool. So thanks for that. Thanks for reminding me of that.
Yeah. And like, I think the part that you hit there is that this is something that you could demonstrate works over and over again, but in space, it really only has to work the one time to open the door, to open, deploy this thing or that thing. And I'm still very jealous that you got to see Cassini before it flew, because as Rod knows, I missed my chance because there wasn't enough room in the car to get me there. And so I had to stay back at the campus while the whole
okay, wait a minute. Speaking as the guy who took the 0G flight that I was supposed to get from you from space.com, and yes, I'll never forget.
Hey, that means that
I'd say being late for Cassini is nothing. So we got to go for another break, which is how I'm going to shut you down on this.
I don't know, Scott. Scott, 0G flights are a dime a dozen, right, Scott? I mean, you and your whole company went on it a few times, right?
Well, there's a good story there when we come back.
Let's do that.
I'm going to grab a glass of water.
Okay, and I'll just sit here and feel very small. All right, we're going to break. We'll be right back. And we're back. Tariq, take it away.
Well, yeah. So we were just talking about traveling in 0G and how, most of the people on this call have had that luxury, but I guess some of us have not. Rod. But no, Scott, you said that you had a story because in the book there's photos of you and like the team, testing stuff, but also enjoying, I guess what was officially the vomit comet, because there wasn't like a 0G company.
No,
back then.
Then.
So tell us about like that experience and what story that you wanted to tell. I assume it's about testing, but also having a little bit of fun.
There's probably, I'm going to tag it back to my dad. When the 747 started flying, I was like 11 years old. We were on our first 747 flight. We got into super heavy turbulence. And my dad said, hey, nobody's looking, follow me. And he unbuckled.
I like your dad more and more.
Oh yeah, my dad's amazing. But anyways, we went into the galley where nobody was, and when we hit wind shear, really heavy vertical wind shear, we jump up and float up and then come down. That was my first experience of it. And then we went back into our seats and giggled. But when we started testing, we found certain things we needed to were benefited from testing in 0G, and like the two of you, I'd die and go to heaven to have that experience. So we found this technique that was a little manipulative, but I'd go to a customer like at Ball Aerospace, and we'd be building a cover for Certif, the IR spacecraft. And I'd say to the customer, we really need to test this in 0G. And they would say, well, how much does that cost? And I'd say, well, about $50K. We could do it and they'd say, oh, we don't have the budget for that. They'd be like, no, you don't understand. We have to take a customer observer with us on that flight. And $50K happened like that. So we probably flew on
a customer observer who, I assume it's going to be you, I think is how you described it in the book. I think it's going to be you.
That. We said you get to select who that is. And so we probably flew a dozen times on there. We had it, we tried to get everybody on the company on the plane as best we could. So anybody could put their name in a hat. We'd take 2 or 3 people could be the front desk person or whoever. And we take them down there because that was a way to give them an experience of being an astronaut, as close as you're going to get. And it is, there's things that cost money in life that you go, boy, that was a waste. I don't think flying on the zero G is that. I think it's an experience of a lifetime that's worth the money you paid at zero G.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
There's hope for us yet, Rod. So
You think?
I think so. Yeah.
So keep doing this podcast, maybe not. So let's just step back for a second. I mean, you kind of went through this, but if you just give me a little more on the story of, here's a guy. So you're an engineer, and you understand you've got something in the bag here with this cool little device, but you're a guy working at a water heater company. Right. And somehow that translates to, I'll call JPL. That there's a little bit of I think more of a story there.
Well, you got to remember, I'm a high tech guy, and I realized as I, through life, I'm high tech, and so I just thought of myself that way. There's an interesting thing that happens in an entrepreneurial mindset. It's almost like a compulsive optimism that has a danger to it. And when you have something that you absolutely in your heart of hearts feel the person you're talking to, if they only understood it,
right,
they would want this. Then when you call up somebody, you're coming from this really genuine place. It's like you're calling up the head of the CDC saying you've come up with a cure for COVID. That's exaggeration, but you have this belief.
Bleach. Sorry.
We're not supposed to get political anymore, Rod.
Sorry,
We're not supposed to get political
it's not
anymore.
Political?
Yeah.
Fact. Sorry, I shouldn't have broken in. Here,
No,
hold on. Let me punish myself.
What were you going to say Rod, about neurodiverse people? Something about neurodiverse people. I don't know what it was. We'll get to that later.
Yeah. One of the few traits we share.
I think there's more than that.
But that's a really good point because, whether you're an entrepreneur, an engineer, an inventor, an author, a TV guy trying to go in and do a pitch. I remember doing a pitch for the Science Channel for a very good show idea. And I went in with an executive producer who was a very close friend who had done like 5,000 hours of top-rated television.
Wow.
And this, 27-year-old executive of the month, because they rotated through there about every 6 months, sitting there listening to us with this heavy Brooklyn accent. And I can't repeat exactly what he said, but he basically said that we had to somehow sexualize science to get on his network.
Yeah, interesting.
Well, except it was worse than make it sexy. And I just sat there looking at this donkey clown like, wow, you are so beneath protozoa.
Donkey clown.
And we tried, and clearly we weren't closing the deal with that elevator pitch. And so this is kind of what you're talking about. It's like going in and saying, this is the greatest thing since coffee creamer. And they're going, what? Yeah. So clearly you've learned how to do that. And, neurodivergence may be a part of that discussion.
I absolutely do think that really helped.
People with ADHD, we know that when we get an idea, it's like, I'd say having a tiger by the tail, but it's kind of like the tiger's got us by our hindquarters, and we just have to tell the world about it. And surely you can see that. And this is what I think about 24 hours a day. Why aren't you? Something like that.
And well, I'm going to go deep on that because you're bringing up a really interesting point. ADHD, I mean, there's all kinds of things that make it challenging, but one of the blessings, the superpowers of it, is the ability to bring together widely disparate things and see patterns in them. How a rose petal is like this. And so there's an ability to bring that together, which also allows you to have a pretty good sense of when you're on to something special. Because when you have something and you're bringing everything together, you can very quickly go, there's nothing like this. And that sort of informed the idea of, I knew I had something nobody else had. It just was a matter of explaining it. And if they didn't get it, it was because I didn't explain it good enough. Maybe I'll do it better next time. And after 20...
Better, more forcefully, perhaps.
My style was always a little, whatever, a little gentler. But you'd learn the things that people would lean in on. You could see them. They'd be sitting and you'd say certain elements and there was a body posture that changed. And actually, it wasn't actually leaning in. It was usually sitting back and going, huh. And so you'd learn when you picked up those clues in people, that's the hot buttons. And then you'd start putting those together and making a more concise pitch. And after cold calling 20 space guys saying, NASA says you might need this, I got a guy, Dick Casper, God bless him, December of 1987, said, I want 3 of them. How much do they cost? And I'd never thought of that.
Let's see. Space rated hardware.
$5 billion.
Let me check with
good.
my friends at Boeing and see what I can get away with. Yes.
Yeah. So that's what I did. I said, hey, Dick, I'll get right back to you on that. Let me do an accurate costing. And I called up JPL and I said, how much can I sell them for? And he said, oh, 5,000 easily, because that's what an explosive squib costs. I couldn't believe that. Called him back and said, hey, Dick, that'll be $16,187, because we all know significant digits mean you did an accurate costing and you're not making much money.
That's right.
And found out he said, yes, I found out I'd left about $30,000 or $40,000 on the table.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
And here, okay, so everybody that's a space company, here's the secret, the secret decoder ring. You say, oh, Dick, that'll be $5,000 a piece. Oh, whoa. Wait, did you say half an inch of stroke? Oh, geez.
That's 50,000.
That's another 50, but they're only 5,000 a piece. And that was the keys to the kingdom that I finally figured out.
Well, see, that's good to know. Tariq, next time we're negotiating on this podcast, well, never mind.
Mm-hmm.
Well, no, this brings to mind, we've seen this like recently in the commercial space sector, just with human space flight too. Like we know for a fact, like how much that like SpaceX is charging NASA like X for launches, and Boeing is charging X plus like a billion, whatever it is, right? I'm not trying to be mean. I'm just trying to like when those documents came out, it was like stark, for the difference, because just like you were saying, it's like they didn't know what to charge at the beginning, like what was good, and so they made a sense like, what do we want to charge? Okay, that's great. Not like what you were just saying about how you left all that money on the table just because it was such a new thing for them to do. So that is really interesting that kind of challenge is something that I guess all entrepreneurs have to do. So
yeah, but dropping into that one you're bringing up, because there's some interesting nuance to that. Elon is all about, how do we make a good profit while we're doing this over and over again? And so his whole paradigm is very different than Boeing's, where it's, well, we're only going to make 8% profit, or 10, but we're going to put a lot of people to work. And, so Elon maybe could have charged more, but his whole point was, I'm going to give you a price point that has you going, you had me at hello.
Yeah.
And I'm going to do it in a way that I make a ton of money eventually. And it's brilliant. It's, wow.
Well, and the fact that he's got these massive rockets basically on a conveyor belt, and we have to take one more break. So Tariq, hold that thought. We'll be right back. All right, Tariq, take it away.
Well, no, I was going to say that Scott just said, you had me at hello. I think that's our first Jerry Maguire quote on the show in a while. I wanted to ask about the culture at Starsis and what kind of what you see as an entrepreneur keeps your team both focused, but also I don't want to say like relaxed, but like in a way where like you were just talking about the 0G, getting people on those flights so that everyone would have an experience. I was really struck, I think, at there's a story in the book, which I don't want to spoil, but it's like, you've had an actuator that's been failing some tests and they gave you one more chance to do it. And everyone's like waiting at a picnic table. And of course it's successful because, we wouldn't be talking to you if it wasn't. Yeah. and you celebrate with some model rocket launches that then become like a tradition to do it, which of course it's very endearing to me. I've got these model rockets right behind me. You can't see it here, obviously. But there they are, right there. My SLS and my Falcon, right there.
Yeah, I get it. I see it.
And so I'm really curious about how those types of traditions, or just like those kinds of activities, really impact a team that is trying to innovate, that is trying to kind of find the niches that you and Starsis were able to do and continue to do in your other endeavors.
Yeah.
But maintain that I don't know if it's a stress level or just that balance of energy to keep going forward.
I'm going to start actually, current time here. What has really astonished me when the book came out was how many people came up and how many people have acknowledged how that culture was so unique and they've never seen it replicated anywhere. And it came about organically. It wasn't crafted. And it actually has impacted a dozen space companies in Colorado where the power of that type of culture, and you can walk into companies and go, yeah, these are people from Starsis. But coming back at the front end, it came from me creating a company that I wanted to work for. And as we talked earlier, the two key elements of who I am are fun and connection, human connection. So those started coming into the company. The way we did it and the thing that made it work is everybody that came into the company I sat down with when I hired them, and I had an acronym that I had on the board, and it was our primary value. And I think you might have seen it in the book, and I'll try to see you. INSHWIS was the acronym. And I'd ask them and they'd say, what's that? And I'd say, it absolutely has to work in space no matter what. And they'd laugh a little, and I'd explain, if our stuff doesn't work, a NASA program could be canceled or an astronaut could be killed. And I'm serious. And we have systems, but they only go so far. And you're going to be in situations where it's up to you and you have to stop. And no matter what it takes, independent of the systems, it has to work in space. And that was branded on people. And because it's spacecraft, people get it viscerally. I mean, they own that, lives are on the line. And then within that, we pushed really hard into fun and family, because you've got this anchoring it's got to work in space. But within that, now that we had that anchored, we just played the others to such an extreme. We had 40 things we did that we called them games. We celebrated blunders in the company. And if you screwed up, we voted who was the worst screw up, and everybody applauded them, and they could win a balloon ride for their family.
Wow.
If they were top of the list. Well, we celebrated wins and heroes also, but we celebrated them equally, saying being honest and transparent about our mistakes is as important as, being heroes. We do things like that. We had masseuses in the company that would come in on Fridays, and when the company hit their financial goals, every other Friday, everybody could sign up and get a 15-minute massage from somebody at the massage school across the street.
Tariq, you and I have to renegotiate our work.
I know, right?
Yeah.
That isn't happening around here. I just want to jump in for a second, because you touched on something that I thought was very interesting from our earlier conversation, which is the idea of intuitive nudges. And I'm sure that's something that you addressed in your speaking quite a bit. Would you mind just talking about that for a minute? What are they? How do they happen? And how do you respond to them in a way that is productive?
There's a real something that developed over time, was how serendipity is created. And this kind of ties into that. But when I came back from NASA, JPL, and I drove into Boulder, I realized I had this chance to start a space company, which was totally crazy and unreasonable. And, my brain saying, no way. I mean, that stuff doesn't happen. But I personally get this sort of goosebump feeling when my intuition is saying something else. And I got that. And by the time I got to the bottom of the hill, I was saying, but why not? And it was from that intuitive flush. I'll always regret never having found out. And so as the company developed, I started to become more aware that I need to take this phone call, or I need to sit next to that person on the bus. Or when I go to this symposium don't try to find the people to get business from. Just let the winds guide you to the people that you want to be with. And as time went on, those became more and more obvious to me, to the point that now when I get that goosebump feeling, I just immediately go, I need to go down that path. And I'd say probably 4 out of 5 times the intuition's right on. And I'd swear miracles happen. I can tell you miracles, that are just from my intuition going, Scott.
So when I was reading your book, and Tariq, I'm sorry, I'll let you jump back in here, but one of the things that occurred to me when you're talking about this is it's a little bit is it the inverse or the obverse of what you just said? But when I was still working in Hollywood, I remember people coming to me and saying, we have to create a cult film. So this is right after Blair Witch, which was a big deal.
Yeah.
It was a big surprise. It was a mistake. It was a POV, found footage, quote unquote, drama, horror film that really took off. And so, of course, everybody wanted to create the next cult hit. And it's like, guys, you can't create a cult film. It happens. It's serendipity, like you say.
Yeah.
Although you do occasionally get that idea when you're speccing out your next job, hopefully, where you think, you get that little chill. It's like, oh, that's a good one. And sometimes that resonates with people.
Yes.
In entertainment, the other 98% of the time it doesn't. But what is that moment exactly that you're talking about? And how does that translate into an engineering reality?
Boy, that's an interesting one to take it to engineering, because I tend to think of it from business and human connection side. But there really is this, and to your point, you might be talking about a design and somebody says, well, why don't we use metal bands instead of gears? And your intuition has so much more available to it in terms of all the things that it's known, and maybe even things it picks up that are a little supernatural. And there'll be this aha of that's it. And there's a that's it moment, goosebumps or an aha. And I don't know if you know this, I'm going to go to the nuclear weapons side of things.
Sure.
There was an aha that happened for Teller to how to make the hydrogen bomb. And he was just sitting out looking over an arroyo, and they were trying to get hydrogen bombs to squeeze, and they couldn't get it to work, fission weapons. And all of a sudden, in probably half a second, he had this boosh of that's how you do it. And that was what, changed our world in terms of hydrogen bombs, not necessarily for a good thing. But science is full of those little, where the heck did that come from? It just was downloaded to me instantly. And Rod, this, the same thing happens in the music industry, where people talk, and in film, people talk about, it wasn't me. It just came to me, and the whole song was there out of my fingertips. And I don't know where it came from. And I think that's all one and the same thing.
Which is why we're pretty sure Mozart was an extraterrestrial, because nobody should be able to compose that kind of stuff when they're...
No way.
He started when he was 4 or 7 or something.
Yeah.
And you look at his career, and he didn't last that long. He died fairly young, and you see all this stuff. Symphony number 40, which means there were 39 before that. By the, I don't know, how old was it he died? Like 32 or something? I mean, it's just uncanny. Sorry, Tariq, I've completely usurped you.
No, I was gonna ask about that intuition thing, and if that's the same for you, Scott, or different than like just trusting your gut, that kind of a thing. It sounds like you get the tingle, and then now to follow the tingle. So
follow the. This goes back to the 6 women in the house at Jackson Hole.
Following the tingle. Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. I digress.
I'm clearing the decks. Go ahead.
Back on track. I think it is different than that, because it is something you're bringing up another good point, which is, what's the time frame when you get those kind of nudges? It's probably a quarter of a second. It's something that happens like this. Which is very different than trusting your gut, where you're going, what should I do? What should I do? What my gut's telling me to do this. It is very much almost a supernatural feeling thing.
So you came up with the device ultimately and a market for it, which is 2 smart things. The third smart thing is there was immediate return on investment. And so much of what we see in new space now is, hey, invest today and profit 20 years from now. And even
Yeah.
for smaller hardware bits, you know, there are people that are working on things that may not catch on for a long time, or if they do, you know, very few people come up with a quantum computer that works with a little bit of wax in a copper tube, right? Yeah. It takes massive amounts of investment and all that. So, I mean, do you think in some ways we've crossed this threshold where it's going to continue to get harder and harder to have a near-term ROI instead of 10 years out? Or is it just a matter of your idea and how you capitalize on it?
The way I see that is when I started the company and all my contemporaries, the other folks, all my friends that started their companies, it was always self-funded, bootstrapped. And it wasn't daddy's money. It wasn't anything like that. It was, we were able to convince a customer that it was worth investing in the development. And that's one thing that's really extraordinary about the US in our ability, the SBIR program. Other countries just, you know, would die and go to heaven for that. But what it did is it was a tremendous separating of the wheat and chaff, because you had to have a great idea. It had to be able to make money right away. You had to have customers adopt it. So it was like this really severe evolutionary pressure that meant that the only companies that survived were ones that were really set up to succeed. So this is all 20 years ago. Now, with people investing in new space, it's a great, or it's a attractive concept that might attract $10 or $20 million. There's a couple problems with that. You know, when you're at PowerPoint slide or things like that, there's a lot of steps before you have a business. VC pressure tends to have people get very aggressive in when I can deliver. You know, VC will say, well, I'll give you 10 million, but you have to deliver in a year. Well, I can deliver in a year. So there's a lot of pressures there. The other thing that's happening is you have to go through a very steep hiring curve. So I got to put 50 people on the team. Space talent is priceless from experience, not from schooling, because we've screwed up 50 times. And we know the silly little things like don't use that lube, or don't have any hooks. Here's one. Don't have any hooks on the outside of your spacecraft, because that's where something can snag and keep your antenna from opening. These really nuanced knowledge, wisdom things. And when you hire 30 people out of school that haven't been in space, you have none of that. You have really talented engineers. And the stuff looks easy to do, but it's not. So there's a fair amount of companies that I'm aware of getting into trouble. And I'm going to go entrepreneurial on you. A smart VC saves 50% of their money and they put it in their back pocket. And the way they work, it's a little predatory, and they're not all like this, is they know that the entrepreneur is going to exaggerate what they can do, the optimism. And they know that they're going to run into trouble and run out of money. And at that point, they're going to come in and say, well, we've got the money for you, but now your company's worth a quarter of what you thought it was. And they come in and can take control of the company at that point. And it's sort of the circle of life, so to speak. And I'm watching a number of companies kind of get to that point, and it's hard to watch. It's very different than our organic, take it easy, grow at 20% kind of curve.
But having been an entrepreneur, it's heartbreaking to see. It's funny you say the circle of life. It is a little bit like watching those documentaries where the lions chase down that poor gazelle. It's like, oh, Bambi, what's happened?
Yeah. I had a VC sit down with me once, and I talked about the predatory behavior, and they're like, well, school of hard knocks. Eventually, by the third time, they'll figure it out. I'm not going to tell them. I was like, yeesh. I'm going to just go a little further with you, and then I'll come back to it. I spent a dozen years outside of space doing a distracted driving solution in partnership with Verizon and Sprint and American Family Insurance. And this was not the space biz, it's business. And when you get back into the space biz, you realize it's full of people that are there because they watch Star Trek and Next Generation. And they were here for the top of Maslow's hierarchy of needs for self-actualization, money secondary. And my gosh, it's a much, much more life-giving business market to be in than a lot of other things out there.
Well, I wanted to ask about that, just the entrepreneurial part of it, because, you have that whole background behind you. Now you have not only kind of the work that you do with future entrepreneurs, but you have the book From the Garage to Mars as a memoir. And I'm curious, what is different? And maybe this is a time for our last question. What is different in that entrepreneurs need to, or future entrepreneurs need to think about now that perhaps, wasn't an issue when you were making your initial forays? Or is it always the same game, new time, and that they have the same challenges that entrepreneurs have faced, throughout time?
Oh, that just triggered an interesting way of thinking about it. The piece that entrepreneurs across the board really miss is this piece of customer discovery, product discovery. There's an arrogance in an entrepreneur that this is so brilliant, I don't need to find out if anybody wants it. Obviously, it will be. You laugh, but believe
No,
me.
it's familiar pain. I'm
Yeah.
vibing with you here.
So if you can do the customer discovery, product discovery, then you've created the bridge that if you have investment capital, you're going to get to the other side. So now you're coming in and saying, listen, I've got Lockheed. They've told me I have an MOU. They're going to buy 100 of these things for $10,000. All I have to do is get rid of the technical risk. Give me $5 million and I'll make that so. You've just de-risked that by a factor of 10. And now you really are down to technical risk, which we know and you can manage because you've got the product risk handled. And it's like the old adage, spend all your time sharpening your axe versus chopping. It's inexpensive to do customer discovery. A few slides and work your way around the industry. And it's also a great way to kill the idea quickly so you don't waste your time. If they're saying, oh yeah, maybe I'll buy it, well then kill it. If they're saying, when can I get it? Here's how much I'll pay for it. What do I need to do to help? And maybe I'll be a partner and be the one that invests. Take the money.
And we'll take 10,000 of them.
Yeah.
I guess kind of as my closing thought here,
Yeah.
I wanted to ask, you've got this notion of, which I love, stop doing what you suck at. Can you explain that? Because that would have saved me about, 40 years off of frustrating ventures. So I'd love to hear what you got to say.
It's true for all of us, but particularly in entrepreneurs, we think we can do it all because we have to. But it doesn't take much of an honest assessment to realize the most important thing is first realize what your brilliance. What are the things you do that are like knife through butter that people look at you and go, how do you do that? And embrace the brilliance. And once you embrace the brilliance, you can realize it's okay to be sucky at other stuff. And like, for instance, me, I'm horrible at quality control. I just am, good enough. But boy, am I good in making connections to customers.
Well, but that's interesting because quality control is like, and again, speaking as a fellow neurodivergent here, it's like, I don't want to do the same thing over and over for the next 40 years.
Not at all.
There are people that can work on assembly lines. That's QC. Yeah. What you want is novel experiences and stimulation, right?
Yeah. Things that, and connection and things that are with people.
Yeah.
And so, for me, the thing that made sense was to bring in the people that could do those things, and they love what you hate. I mean, they love it, and they hate what you love. And the big problem with technical entrepreneurs, the big one is technical entrepreneurs in general suck at operations and business. They can write proposals really well.
Yeah.
And that's the piece. If you can get a Steve Jobs to partner with a Steve Wozniak, that's where the power comes from. Mm-hmm. And you can look out there, and when you find that partner, that's when things take off. And when you think you can do it all, okay, yeah, maybe Gates did, but it's a rare animal that pulls it off, that can do it all.
That's an interesting point. And it makes, you can't look at the news for 7 minutes without seeing a new Elon Musk story these days, but he kind of does seem to do both, which makes him novel and highly neurotic, I think, in my estimation. This has been a real pleasure. I want to thank you and everybody for joining us for this episode number 138 that we like to call From the Garage to Mars with Scott Tibbitts. Where can we buy the book?
Oh, boy, it's funny you mentioned that, Rod.
Yeah.
I just happen to have it in my hand right here.
That was good timing.
I would love for you to buy it on www.scotttibbitts.com, which has all kinds of cool things, including the stories I tell in third grade, which we didn't get to. But you can also just get it on Amazon. All you have to do is Google Space Entrepreneur, Scott Tibbitts, it'll be right there.
And how do we spell Tibbetts? Just for those.
Oh, with too many T's. That's why I say spell space entrepreneur. Put space on. But it's I got to come up with a better branding for my name. But it's Tibbitts. So a lot of T's.
See, it's hard to mispile. Although people do manage to throw an I in there from time to time. So where's besides buying the book, which we know all our loyal listeners are going to do because they love us. Where's the best place to keep up with your future ventures? And Tariq wants to know if you're going to fly on either Blue Origin or Virgin Galactic. One of these.
When do you go to space?
At somebody else's expense, preferably.
Yeah. I mean, just my point of view is 4 minutes aren't enough. Orbital space would be doing it. Otherwise, I'm not as excited about
just stick with VR. Okay, you gave us our website, so your website. So,
and to your question. There's a group of people I've gotten together. We call it Level 6 Space. It's kind of like Ocean's 11. And these are all people that have exited from companies.
Yeah.
We have a combined total of about 200 years of experience and some of the smartest people in the world. And we just don't want to retire. We want to keep helping out. And so I'm having huge fun. You can also find that under Level 6 Space, bringing this, A-team Ocean's 11 group to the hard problems around the world. So that's what I'm doing now. Is I'm really enjoying that, helping people with the hard problems.
Well, the second you said that, I kind of thought of muscle cars and cigarettes, but I realized it's a little more than that. So that's cool. Tariq, where can we find you throwing your life away with your PlayStation these days?
No, I don't have a PlayStation. I'm a PC person, Rod. You know this. I built my own computer.
I kind of do. Don't give me that. I've built 30 of those. Don't give me that.
No, you can find me at space.com as always. Also on the Twitters at Tariq J. Malik. This weekend, you will find me in our fair nation's capital, Washington, D.C., because I'm going to the center of my Taekwondo instructorship, and we're going to go get master instruction from there this weekend. Yeah, it's going to be great.
I haven't heard anything about this.
Well, I'm a first degree brown belt, right? So in Taekwondo. So I don't know if I've talked about that before, but
not much.
I can break 3 boards with
like my fire truck.
I can break 3 boards with my foot. So I'm trying. We're on the road to black belt. Maybe in a couple of years, or 3, I can actually say that I can do that. So we'll see.
Well, I want to see you smash cinder blocks with your forehead, but that's just me.
Okay, not there yet. Not there
and
yet.
Of course, you can always find me at pilebooks.com or at astromagazine.com. Do remember, you can always drop us a line at twis@twit.tv. That's TWIS@twit.tv. We welcome your comments, suggestions, and ideas, and we answer each and every email. New episodes of this podcast published every Friday, so make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcatcher. We don't care which one. Just make sure you give us 5 stars or thumbs up or a wag of the tongue or whatever it is that they want to see to let the world know how much fun we are. And while you're at it, don't forget you can get all the great programming with video streams for the ones that don't normally provide it on the Twit Network ad-free on Club Twit, as well as some extras that are only available there for just $7 a month. Now, I ask you two gentlemen, what else can you get for $7 a month that's as cool as what we just sat here and did today?
That's not even a month.
I can't think of it.
Not even a month of Fortnite.
The
you
Discord.
get a space actuator a month. These were $7.
What a good alignment.
Yeah, wasn't that? That's called a callback in improv.
Yeah, that was much better than what than where I was going. And I completely forgot to ask you about your career in stand-up comedy, but we'll get to that next time. Yeah. You can follow the Twit Tech Podcast Network at Twit on Twitter and on Facebook and twit.tv on Instagram. Thank you, Scott. Appreciate very much having you here. And thanks to Leonard David for introducing us. And we'll see everybody next time.
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Can I give you a very high compliment? You guys are big. You guys are big fun. This is the funnest I've had in a podcast in a long time. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
That's better than 5 stars. Thank you very much.
All right.
Is that spaceship? Is that? Oh, sorry. I thought we were done.
We're not done. Keep rolling. Well, you
Remember
guys are
this?
just.
Well, yeah.
killing
So
me.
there's everyone's signatures on the rocket. It's in the book.
That's the one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is
So
that-
yeah.
The Estes Alpha.
This was the one that I had everybody sign when we sold the company, and it was the last rocket launch we had coming back to
Aw.
it.
Yeah. And then is that Spaceship One behind you too? Yeah.
Yep, Spaceship
yeah.
One. We merged
And then
with, did that.
I'm
and then-
sorry, Tark. Did you want to get into a second hour? Shall I
No,
just,
no,
like,
I'm sorry.
reset the timer?
I noticed all that stuff in the background there. It must be my ADD that was there, and of course that balloon that's been. So it's all the technologies for getting in space, all in one grow.
Wow.
All right.
All right.
That's
Yeah.
it.
Next
Thank you
time.
so much, Scott. Thank you.